Suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back on this beautiful Wednesday morning when we do come to you, sorry, on this beautiful Tuesday morning where we do come to you live once again to discuss and digest further what's yet happened in the footballing world. Do indulge me on this one this morning. We will be speaking about Arsenal. We'll be talking about whether they can keep on winning the ugly way. And yeah, that will be the gist of our conversation this morning. This one will be a bit short because I need to run off to attend a vigil mass. So we won't get into the particulars of that one, but yeah, that's the reason as to why we will be keeping this one short. But the question we attempt to answer this morning is: can Arsenal keep on winning the ugly way? Because the reason as to why I say the ugly way, it's not because practically that they have chosen to play ugly, but it's because of how opponents are setting up against them. So whereas a lot of people are giving them the stick in regards to how they apply themselves, how they create very few chances from open play, how they earn that with all their quality in their armor, in terms of their squad, they're not they're not they're sort of not asking teams off in that sense. So I want to digest that and see where does that lead, how does that come about, you know, is there justification for the way they are winning, you know, can they do better, you know, there's all those questions, you know. So and yeah, but anyways, sorry, was just having our audios tested just to make sure everything does check out perfectly well for purposes of this broadcast to go smoothly. Anyways, here's what I'll say. Here's what I will say is that we know that Arsenal are one of the most on-form teams in the Premier League as we speak, if not the very best. They lead the table, of course, with the 4 points ahead of the second place, Bournemouth. Nobody had expected Bournemouth would be here at this stage of the season. It's only been 9 games, and we still have a whole 29 games to play. As we have said time and again, the league in itself is a marathon compared to other cup competitions. Is that with cup competitions, you know, you play a particular set of games. There's no cup competition where you play even half of the number of games that you get to play in the league. So the league in itself is a marathon, while the cup competitions feel like sprinters. You know, so for example, you look at the Carabao Cup. Many teams start at the third round, knock off your opponent, go to the fourth round. After that, if you can advance through, you will be to the quarterfinals, through that semi-finals, and then the final. And if you do get to win it, you win it. That's just the nature of it. Then you look at the FA Cup, literally in a similar route. You know, smaller teams kick it off early. They play through different ranks and, you know, levels until they get to that stage. Usually in January, where we get Premier League teams participating, and we take it on from there. So, you know, it's a win that one fixture and then have a entirely different opponent. Whereas for the league, rest assured is that if you do not beat them at their own turf, you will have to meet them at your turf. So it's a round robin. So it's always different. So with 9 games to play, Arsenal have won 7 games. They've lost 1 game. They've drawn 1 game. All the teams subsequent to them are from the second place team to the 7th place team on the Premier League log. That's in as far as standings go, and that's Liverpool. So in between there, you have Bournemouth, Tottenham Hotspur, Sunderland, Man City, Manchester United, and Liverpool themselves have all won 5 fixtures. Then it's then the draws that and losses that differentiate them from each other, because Liverpool have 4 losses, Man United, Manchester City have all 3 losses to their names, while Sunderland, Tottenham Hotspur all have 2 losses. And then and then Bournemouth have just a single loss. So anyways, and then the draws in there. So Arsenal, even though they are winning, because they have won a good number of games by small margins, you would argue, and those small margins have been visible in their 1-0 victory against Crystal Palace. Subsequent to that, or sorry, prior to that, they had one by a similar scoreline against Fulham by goal to nil. You know, this round it was Ebeleche Eze. The previous weekend it was what's his name? It was Leandro Trossard who won for them that game. He scored to win that game. Then on another given day, you further wind things back. You'll find a 2-0 victory, I think, against West Ham United. That's what you will find, you know. And again, it's when you look to it, or when you look on it, is that again, you see that the goal margins are so small. And then you go back to the Newcastle game that they won. It was 2-1. And then in there is a draw against Manchester City. So my point is that they are not scoring as many goals as one would have loved. Particularly this season, I think there's only one game in which they scored, plenty of goals, and that was against Leeds United, in as far as the Premier League was concerned. So you look up on it and you think to yourself, why are Arsenal applying themselves the way they are applying themselves? Are they not doing enough? You know, are they not doing enough? That's the first thing you question yourself about. Are they doing enough to win games by 5 margins? Because they beat up against Leeds by 5 goals to nil. Then you have to go back to, then you have to move away from the Premier League to go to the UEFA Champions League, where you'll find a 4-0 victory against Atletico de Madrid. Those are 2 of their highest scoring games so far this season. You go back to the opening day, they won 1-0 against Manchester United. Maybe Nottingham Forest, they won 3-0, and all the others have been 2-0, 2-1, 2-0, 1-0, that kind of scoreline. And we are talking about a team that's went out to the market looking to revamp their creativity, or to bluster their creativity, and they did that by bringing in players like Ebeleche Eze. They went on to bring on Noni Madueke. So why are they not creating enough chances as it is? So for me, there's a number of factors, and I want to drive the narrative that the kind of narrative that Sky Sports is trying to drive. By yesterday they were showing the attacking record, by Premier League ranking this season, and in a way, certainly, I know they're taking these shots at Arsenal. So, for example, Arsenal have scored 16 goals so far in the Premier League this season, and when Sky Sports shows you that they have scored the 4th, that they rank 4th in goals scored, they do not tell you that the top 3 only exceed Arsenal by a single goal. They do not tell you that fact. They sort of it's called intellectual dishonesty. They leave that out. Then they've gone brought down the goals and tell you that 9 of those goals have come from set pieces, and they run fast. Then goals from open play are 5. I do not know why they are even 5, because maybe maybe the penalty goals have been excluded from the 9 above, but I would argue that they're 7, but depending. And they rank them 17. Of course, 17 is really, really bad, Then they look at open play XG. They rank 8 with 7.8. Percentage goals from open play is 31%, and they rank the lowest, 20th. Percentage of expected goals from open play is 57%, and they rank 19th. Now, they give you all that data. Again, what they do not tell you, in other words, the narrative they drive is that they drive the narrative of Arsenal's lack of creativity. And whereas you could make that case, depending on how you argue it, I want to beg to differ. One, when you look at the kinds of games they've had to play this season, and particularly in the Premier League, that's where our focus will be. Go to Manchester United, not the best of games, they won. Go to Leeds, Leeds played an open game, Arsenal scored 5. They went away to Liverpool on match day 3. They lost by a goal to nil. It took a welder by Dominic Soboslai in the 83rd minute from a free kick from about 25 yards out to win that game. Again, they did not create much. I think Noni Madueke, even though was withdrawn at halftime, was Arsenal's best player in that game. Victor Gyökeres had 0 shots on goal. Against Nottingham Forest, they won 3-0. Nottingham Forest opened up a little bit. That was Ange Postecoglou's first game. You go to Manchester City. Now, again, this will tell you why I think we ought to criticize less about Arsenal's lack of creativity. They faced a Manchester City team at the Emirates Stadium, and Manchester City parked the bus. Manchester City played with a low block. Manchester City put 10 players behind the ball. You know, that's the most conservative you will ever see Pep Guardiola. I had never seen him whatsoever, regardless of the size of opponent he was facing. But this time around, he looked at the pieces on board and said, "Look here, I'm facing a team that is better than me at the moment, or that is better than my team at the moment. How do I limit the damage? How do I go to the Emirates Stadium and take all 3 points? Last season, I was humiliated in a 5-1 thumping. How do I avoid that?" So he decided to play a conservative game. And alas, they went into the lead through Brad Erling Haaland in the first half. They held on to that lead until late on when Gabriel Martinelli came off the bench, scored the equalizer, and the game finished 1-1. So if you're playing in a league where the most fluid team, the most open team that you will ever know, a Pep Guardiola coached team, comes at Arsenal and they play conservative football and they play defensive football, for which I do not blame Pep Guardiola for deploying that strategy, because for any manager, you deploy a strategy that you think will win you the game, that you think will get you all the 3 points. That's the objective. That's what you want at the end of the day, But, and this is, if you have a team the size of Man City, the caliber of Man City, with the playing style of Man City, deploying that kind of playing style, against Arsenal, then clearly you will understand why they struggle, why they are not creating enough open play chances. Because practically teams apply themselves totally differently when they first step. They play with the low block, they play with the mid block, they just put bodies behind. Look at the game against Crystal Palace. Now, the funny thing is that Arsenal played Crystal Palace, winning that game by a goal to nil. Literally a result of a set piece that wins them the game. And yet, the previous weekend, Crystal Palace had been involved in a 6-goal thriller as they shared the spoils in a 3-all draw with AFC Bournemouth. So it's easy for one to ask yourself, how do Bournemouth score 3 past Crystal Palace and then Arsenal struggle to even score 1? So that's the easy question. Now, what that question would ignore is how did Crystal Palace behave against Bournemouth and how did they behave against Arsenal? So against Arsenal, again, very conservative, put all bodies behind the ball, look to catch Arsenal on the counter-attack, whereas at Bournemouth, they were a bit more open. I mean, they look at the team in Bournemouth as a team for which they are within the same sort of range or bracket, in terms of size. It's the kind of team, the kind of opponent that shouldn't be forcing them to sit back. When they measure themselves on the weighing scale, Bournemouth is not that much ahead of them as it would be Arsenal. So they play a bit of an open game and then they come to Arsenal and play with the low block. They play, conservatively. And then suddenly you want us to be blaming Arsenal for not creating enough chances, for not scoring more goals, for not scoring open play goals. No, I do not want to believe that. I do not want to take that line of thought. Or, you go to Newcastle, same story, and look at how they played at Newcastle. They were very attacking minded. They went forward more often than not. Chances fell to them. Nick Pope had a very immaculate day in goal. Arsenal should have had a penalty. It was never given. Same thing happened in their 1-0 victory against Fulham. They should have had a penalty. It was never given. Bernard Leno made a couple of saves with Victor Gyökeres having a Tempson call and things like that. Then so in a nutshell, Arsenal are constantly facing off with teams that deploy or that play conservative. And again, I'm not going to blame it on those teams because, like I said, for any manager going into any given game, you assess your team, you analyze your opponent, and see what methodology do you think can get you the best result? Whether you're looking for draw, whether you're looking for victory, or whether you're looking to limit the damage, in that sort of sense. So we cannot blame the opponent managers or teams on how they deploy themselves against Arsenal. And in the same breath, I do not want us to be criticizing Arsenal for not scoring as many when they meet those teams, yet those very teams play differently when they are faced with different opponents. So at the end of the day, all managers craft out strategies that get them the best result, and the best result on any given day is a victory. Clean sheets are a plus. But at the end of the day, it's the 3 points that matter. If you win 4-3, you will take the result. If you win 1-0, you will take the result because it's all 3 points. Now, the other thing I want to look on is, and this is not an excuse, but it's a factor in that debate, if you're going to have that debate, is that Arsenal have had so many injuries. Now, because they have this sort of rich squad depth, is that some of the injuries their players have suffered, or some of the players that have been absent through injury, have gone under the radar. That you go into a match day and you're talking about less about the injuries they have, but more about how they're going to deploy themselves and still win a game of football because they have the options. Present day, by the conclusion of that game against Crystal Palace, let's start. You already have Gabriel Jesus out, Kai Havertz out, Martin Odegaard out, Noni Madueke out. Those are 4 players that possibly starters out through injury. By the tail end of the game, you had Declan Rice withdrawn for injury, William Saliba for similar reasons, injury. You had Ricardo Carafiori withdrawn through injury. Apparently, Bukayo Saka had a slight issue. Now, let's even put Bukayo Saka out of it. But already that's 7 players that are out injured. All those 7 players are starters. Now, in the same squad, you had Pierre Hinkap, who had just recovered from injury. You had Ben White, who had just recovered from injury, not so far back, and things like that. We know that Gabriel Magalhaes had been withdrawn in that game against Atletico Madrid with an issue. And coming into the weekend, he was a bit of a doubt because he hadn't trained for 2 days, prior to the game. So it's not going to be an excuse, but it's a factor for their creativity. The reason as to why I bring it is that we know that Martin Odegaard is Arsenal's most creative player. You remember how they started the game against West Ham? It was, I think, Declan Rice at the pivot of that midfield with Martin Odegaard, with Martin Odegaard and Ebeleche Eze. That's as attacking minded as you're going to find Mikel Arteta. First of all, it was a home game, and they gave it a good run. Given that they were, I think, playing together for the very first time in that sort of combination, it had yet to click, really. Although it had given you a couple of good moments here and there, but it had yet to click. But it's something that he was willing to try out. Unfortunately, Martin Odegaard suffered that, medial ligament injury that forced him off, and then they brought on Martin Zubimendi. So, if you ask me, the question I'll put to you is, when in this season, how many times have you seen Arsenal deploy the most attacking side? And speaking of attacking sides, it doesn't get better than any of that midfield trio of Declan Rice, of course, at the pivot, or whether it would have been Martin Zubimendi, and then ahead of him, You have Eze and Martin Odegaard. Then on the other side, you'd have Bukayo Saka. On one side, you'd have either Noni Madueke, Leandro Trossard, or Gabriel Martinelli and Victor Gyökeres. You know, how many times have you seen that this season? Only, I think, once in that game against West Ham, and it was for only about, what, 25, 30 minutes? So, Arsenal's limited creativity is impacted by two things. One, predominantly how teams deploy against Arsenal. Two is the absence of their most creative player in Martin Odegaard. And one would argue, but yeah, you brought Eberechi Eze to be a creative player, so he should be giving Arsenal the goal and should be getting the better of, you know, opponents. That's true, but let's not forget he's new to this team, and because he is new to this team, he is bound. He also equally needs time to gel in, to adapt to this team. You know, yes, he is well adapted to the Premier League, and overall he is not struggling in his start to the Arsenal career. The way you draw comparison to what's his name, Florian Wirtz at Liverpool. You know, so there's that difference. But also you cannot ignore the fact that he's entirely surrounded by new players for whom he has to adapt to. He has a target man in Victor Gyökeres, who is equally new to the team. They have zero chemistry whatsoever. He plays with a midfield that is new to them. Sorry, that is new to him as is to him. So, sorry, it's with the midfield that is new to him as they themselves are new to him. So, like, you look at all that mix, and Arsenal have yet to find not balance, but that sort of consistency. We know that the kind of consistency they've tried to deploy was with, of course, you know, Martin Zubimendi, Declan Rice, and Eberechi Eze, and if Odegaard is available, it would be Odegaard. So that's how they are fun to adapt in that sort of sense. But I'm dreaming of the kind of period of time where Arsenal have almost all their players fully fit and available for selection. We do not know how Kai Havertz, the kind of impact he would have had in this kind of team. We do not know. And we can only hope, we can only wait and see, you know. But I think if they had all those options around, they will give us entirely different feel. Let's not forget, for one, that coming into the start of the season, Gabriel Martinelli was not the best on-form player, and still isn't. Yes, he scored 3 consecutive goals in the UEFA Champions League, but he's not the most on-form player in that Arsenal team. Then you had Noni Madueke, who was starting his career, Arsenal career, and he showed signs of brilliance. We saw that against Liverpool, we saw that against Nottingham Forest. Yes, he had yet to provide any assist or, you know, score a goal, but we saw how he was troubling defenses and how he was creating spark moments within games. But with that said, or that notwithstanding, he's now out injured and he has to be out of the squad for a bit of time. And that again impacts on his momentum. So he's part of the creativity that Arsenal brought him that's absent already through injury. So can they continue winning the ugly way? Of course, you cannot count your luck to go on for that long. There's going to come a time when set piece goes dry up. The question should be, what's the plan B? And the plan B is because the set pieces are like the plan B, and the creative play should be the plan A, and as is expected. But so the question is, when those set piece goals dry up, what will be Arsenal's go-to answer? Perhaps they will cross the bridge when they get there, and We saw it, I think, sometime last season when they went a good chunk of spell without scoring any goals from set pieces. We saw that, and they struggled. But part of the reason as to why they struggled last season again was so many injuries. You look at the leadership of Gabriel Magalhaes that he offers to that defense, and I think the bit about this Arsenal side is that they have leaders in all departments. Up front, you have Bukayo Saka, not the most vocal players. Uh, in that centre back, you have Gabriel Magalhaes. Once he's there, you trust he's going to command his, fellow defenders into shape. David Raya will do a fair share bit of that, especially when it comes to set piece plays against them. Then in that midfield, you have Declan Rice. For as long as he's there, he offers you that leadership that is both vocal and through hard work, in that sort of sense. So it's also a huge advantage for them, in that regard. But I think if the set pieces are to dry up, which they can at any given time, is that you hope that by the time they dry up, then their creativity has sparked into motion. Because we are talking about a team that is hard to play with. Christian Mosquera, new to the team. Martin Zubimendi, new to the team. Noni Madueke, new to the team. Ebeleche Eze, new to the team. Victor Yokaris, new to the team. So over the weekend, you had Pierre Hincap make his Premier League debut. He's new to the team as well. So, of course, the chemistry is not bound to be the same as it was back in 2024 or in the 2023-2024 season, when all those players that were so accustomed to playing alongside each other for a good number of games, many games, in Thomas Partey, Martin Odegaard, Declan Rice, Gabriel Martinelli, Bukayo Saka, Leandro Trossard, Kai Havertz, were all in motion. You do not expect the same delivery. Yesterday we were discussing. Yesterday morning we were discussing Liverpool, and part of the justification, at least in my opinion, in my school of thought, in my view, as to why they've had to struggle so far this season, are losing 5 out of 6 games in their last across all competitions, is because they have so many new players. And these are not just squad players, they are starters. They are part of the core of the team. You have Alexander Isak, Hugo Tike, Fran Vitz, Conor Bradley, sorry, not Conor Bradley, but Milos Kakez, Jeremy Frimpong, and things like that. So you do think through it and say, look here, that's one too many players that need to play alongside each other, that need to learn to play alongside each other. Just a second. So so the same thing that is with Liverpool, and by the way, it's you go to Manchester City. It's one of the reasons that some of the players that are playing in that team are players that joined Manchester City between January and the summer. When you talk about Gianni Riendas, when you talk about Nico Gonzalez, when you talk about Omar Mamouche, when you talk about when you look at Ryan Cherki, Ryan Ashnory, and some of these have also been out through injury. That's for Ryan Cherki, Ryan Ashnory. They are missing Lodri. Again, it's an injury issue. The same way Liverpool are missing, Ryan Gravenberch in that midfield, that deep line hole. And guys, for those of you that remember, we had that debate. We had that conversation. We had that analysis that if Liverpool find themselves in a situation where they have to miss Ryan Gravenberch out on injury for a couple of months, can they cope? Can Wataru Endo start and give them the same performance? And it doesn't look like it's been the case. you know, it doesn't look like it's been the case because he is not even trusted to start, you know, in those games. So he is not even trusted to start. And I kept hammering that drum. That's, you know, that Liverpool need a holding midfielder. They need a central midfielder, whether as a squad player, as a backup, as an elite, because for two consecutive windows or three, they had tried to sign one. They went for Martin Zubimendi the previous summer. They tried to sign Romeo Lavia and Moises Caicedo, lost both to Chelsea, and before they resorted to Wataru Endi. So they needed somebody. And this season is so far it showed that in his absence, they struggled to find a balance in that midfield. Yes, you can play there McAllister, you can play there Szoboszlai, but it's not the same, you know. So it was bound to happen. So when you look at all these teams that are struggling, you have that facet. Man United themselves. Yes, we critique them for a good chunk of time, but predominantly it was for the manager. And whereas that is still true for him, you can also not ignore that he has many players that need to fit his playing style and into the entire machine of the team. In Mbumo, in Cunha, in Sesko, you know, in that kind of thing. Anyways, guys, do let me know what your thoughts are, but allow me to repeat here. Put your comments down in the comment section. But allow me to wrap it here and wish you a wonderful rest of the day. Like I told you, it was going to be short because I need to run out and see if I can attend a vigil mass for this season. So stay blessed, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye for now.